I'm so excited for this video. Okay, remember in my last video when I was like, I'm so tired. I have no energy. I'm just so tired. That was COVID. I had COVID, and that's why I was so tired. I am better now, but that's what that was. Hi, my name is Hannah. If you are new here, welcome. If you are not new, welcome back. I think this video is going to be really fun. At least I hope it's very fun because I've been working on it for a very long time. Basically, the short and long of it is I have been keeping like a running spreadsheet of various reading statistics for the last 3 years. The eagle-eyed viewer will notice that I've been making videos for less than a year, but I have 3 years of reading stats. So this data hasn't gone anywhere. I haven't done anything with it. It's just for me to look at and noodle over. So that's all. So today I would just kind of like to compare and contrast the reading stats that I have from 2019, 2020, and 2021. See if any patterns emerge, just see if there's anything interesting or noteworthy. This might be mind-numbingly boring to people. I think it's super interesting. I'm not gonna spend too much more time talking because this video is probably going to be very long. Okay, I'm also going to scoot off to the side to accommodate a little more room for any charts and graphs, of which there will be many. So I do have my laptop right in front of me, and I'm also looking at the chart. So if I keep looking down, I'm just reading my notes. So the first stat that I think, just kind of the data set that we're working with, is the total of books read per year. So in 2021, I read 76 books. In 2020, I read 95 books. And in 2019, I read 102. So I have been declining, but that's okay. The first statistic I want to look at is the genre breakdown per year. However, okay, so to me, breaking down by genre is going to be, at least partially, inherently pretty flawed. So often a book is not just one genre. So I usually go off of what the publisher has it categorized as, and or where it's shelved in Barnes & Noble. Unless I think that's wrong too, in which case I'll just make something up. An example I always use is Say Nothing by Patrick Radden Keefe, because this book is in Irish history, but it could also be in true crime, it could be in international affairs, it could be sociology even, social sciences. So this is like my example of a book that is one thing, but is also many things. You know what I mean? So basically for this part, for genre, because I'm not going to go through like line item by line item on all of these charts because that would take forever and it's not interesting. I'm just going to point out things that seem interesting to me. Okay, so the first year, 2019, there's a lot going on with this chart. Also, I just use Google Sheets and I just leave whatever colors it automatically puts on all the fields. So if one data point changes colors from year to year on different graphs, I don't care. I'm sorry. So 2019 was 34% just general fiction, literary fiction, or oftentimes contemporary. I kind of just put them all together. 2019 had a couple outliers in it. So I read 11.8% of my reading was bio and memoir. That is very much above average because in 2019 I was still in the grips of a David Sedaris binge. I think I read like 5 of his books in 1 year, and I read like 2 or 3 the year before. So I don't even know how many books he has, but I've read most of them now. And that's another one. You go to the bookstore, they are all categorized under humor. I categorize them as bio memoir, like that. Also worth noting to me, I split young adult sci-fi fantasy and adult sci-fi fantasy into two separate wedges of the pie. Same thing with like YA fiction and general fiction. I could be convinced to pool those together because I also count age group in a different chart. So that might be something to consider going forward. Historical fiction, about 6%, and then 1% each of psychology, sport, romance, history, and drama. Drama being like plays and scripts. The 2020 chart, however, 31% fiction, so up a little bit. 3.2% bio or memoir. So yeah, 2019 was an outlier. That was an exceptional amount of biography and memoir I was reading. Young adult sci-fi fantasy kind of takes its place as the second largest genre. That is something that I typically, historically, have read a lot of, especially when I'm also reading lots of like very literary books and very heavy books. And I finish those, I just want to read about teenagers who can do magic. Historical fiction coming in about 8%, romance up to 3%, and then again 1-ish% each of sport, poetry, self-help drama, current affairs, humor, medical, and social science. I don't know what I read that was medical. Now 2021, general fiction or lit fiction is still my top category, but just 25%. Biography memoir disappeared completely. I didn't read. I mean, The Kid Stays in the Picture might be a memoir, but it's like a showbiz memoir. Anyways, this I found really interesting. The nearly even split between young adult and adult sci-fi fantasy. They were more or less the same amount. And if I did combine those into one genre, that would be my top genre for the year. I think Leigh Bardugo is to blame for that because this last year I did my full Grishaverse read through, so that definitely skewed it. Romance up to 5%. Again, since in 2021 I did read fewer books overall. If I read 1 or 2 books in a category, that will just automatically take up a bigger slice of the pie than 1 or 2 books would in years past, if that makes sense. But yeah, smallest slices of the pie are social science and current affairs. I probably had 1 or 2 each of those. So yeah, food for thought on maybe I just need like an additional column where I do age breakdown and like just general genre. Maybe that's the thing to do. So I just keep track of both because I can't decide which way I want it. Next category we're going to be looking at is format. I started listening to audiobooks about midway through 2018 when I first started working as a bookseller, and I realized, oh my god, I need to be reading more than I am to be able to do my job well. And ever since I started doing that, audiobooks have taken the lion's share of my reading every year. So in 2019, it was 72.5% audio versus 27.5% physical. So that's a pretty consistent thing for me. 2020, however, Player 3 enters the game, ebooks. So ebooks do enter the conversation in 2020. They're only accounting for about 4% of my reading for the year. But I didn't start ebooks until November of 2020. And even so, I read 4 in 2 months. So coming into 2021, this is what I was talking about when the charts are weird colors. I really hate that. So audiobooks down to 48.7% of my reading, 22.4% physical, and about 29% ebook. So yeah, this still mostly audiobooks. That's just more of a time thing. I listen to audiobooks when I'm getting ready, when I'm driving, when I'm in the shower, when I'm doing chores. I'm pretty much always listening to an audiobook. I never really listen to music anymore. So maybe that's something I can dial back a little bit this year, maybe. This next stat really made me chuckle because the next stat is age group. So usually adult versus young adult. I never read middle grade. I'm sorry. But what's funny about this is that no matter what, this ratio stays the same every year. It is almost identical. and I did not do that on purpose. 2019, 83.3% adult. 2020, 83.2% adult. And in 2021, 82.9% adult. That is, I could not get that more similar with differing totals of books every year if I tried to. I don't know how I did that. I don't know if that stat is worth like continuing keeping track of. That is really funny to me. I don't know. This is all funny to me. All right, this next stat is probably like the next most problematic to genre, and it's country of origin. So I do have some caveats on how I do this, and I have a disclaimer. So hold on. So first of all, if a book doesn't have a single obvious country of origin, I just don't put one. I'm not going to try to shoehorn it into a country. I'm just not going to do that. An example I have, one time I read a fantasy book that was by two authors. The authors were from different countries, and the fantasy world had no cultural basis in either of their home countries. It was not set in any real place or inspired by any real place, really. So I just didn't put a country of origin because, I don't know, it would just be silly to do that to me. And also, oh god, that's fun. Okay, I read a lot of Irish books, and you will notice on my charts, I don't think I did it in 2019, but in 2020 and 2021, you will see that for the purposes of this chart, I have grouped together the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. Please do not jump up my ass about this. I know I read quite a few Irish books. I'm always seeking out Irish books to read, but so often books that I read about one place also involve the other, or they take place before the partition of Ireland. And when I talk about Irish literature, I do generally mean to talk about the whole island and all of the peoples thereupon. My eyes are open. I know what I'm saying. I know what I'm doing. Lived in Ireland. I know Irish people. I know Irish history. I don't need a scolding or a lesson. I know. It's okay. I just wanted to get that out of the way. All that to say, 2019, count of countries. I had 14 different countries represented in my reading in 2019. The US is very clearly out front, about a little over 60%, followed by England, Ireland, and then Greece and Nigeria also showed up, and Canada were pretty well represented here as well. Versus 2020, the US still holding on about 60%, England and Ireland close behind. Big growth year for Ireland in 2020 in my stats. There's also significantly less variety than there was in 2019. There's only 9 countries represented on this chart. And 2021, USA pulling ahead a little bit, 64%, but still the lion's share of my reading. England pulling ahead, Ireland falling by the wayside a little bit. There are 12 countries represented in this chart. I think that's pretty good. There are a couple more countries represented than the previous year, even though I read about 20 fewer books than the year before. So it's definitely room for improvement there, I think. I read a lot of American literature. I just don't have to. Okay, this one, fiction versus nonfiction. I mentioned in my reading goals for 2022 video that it felt like this year I've been reading less nonfiction, but I didn't have my stats done yet, so I couldn't really say if that was true or if it was just a feeling. And it was true. I have read less nonfiction this year, or in 2021. In 2019, it was about 21.8% nonfiction. And then in 2019, it was about 14.7% nonfiction. And in 2021, it was just a little over 12% nonfiction. So not only was the ratio smaller, I did read fewer books overall in 2021, so that was a really small amount, and that's something I definitely want to be more conscientious about, factoring some nonfiction into my reading. There's some beautiful nonfiction writing out there, and I intend to find it. Now this one, I really, really, really welcome suggestions on how to do this next stat better, and that is the gender breakdown of the authors that I'm reading. So this initially I put into place to try to make sure. I have a tendency, because I like to go for classics and go for things like that, I'm very worried about my reading getting very male focused. Just, oh god, it's just not it's a very inelegant system. I don't really like how I do it, but I don't know another way to do it, and I would love to hear suggestions. So I do have male, female, and other, which I hate that I have that. Okay, so other is just kind of a catch-all. I don't mean like other. I mean like not a dude, a gal. If there are multiple authors of different genders, any authors who are non-binary, generally gender non-conforming, anything else, it kind of all goes into this third category. My gender count in 2019 was about 56.6% female, 43.4% male, which, you know, is good. I want to keep it around 50-50. And then in 2020, pretty much was. It was 50.5% female, 2.1% other. In 2019, I don't know if I just wasn't cognizant of maybe not every author I'm going to read is one dude, one lady, or if I just didn't read any authors that could be categorized as anything else. And then in 2021, I was thinking about just like not even tracking this statistic, because it really only existed to check myself, to keep myself from just reading all like books by men. And that wasn't happening. So I kind of was thinking maybe I'll just not even pay attention to this stat anymore, since I don't have a good way to track it, and it's not really necessary, and it's not really telling me anything about my reading. But 2021 was a little interesting. So 64.5% female authors. So yeah, this was a real girls rule year. So yeah, I don't know if that is a stat worth tracking, or if there's a better way to track it. I think I might just not track it anymore, because it doesn't seem to be a problem. The thing that I'm worried is a problem is not actually a problem. You know what I mean? These next couple stats I don't have charts for. I just think it's interesting. I tracked what I call screen reads, not to beat them to death, but I really love reading books before they become movies and TV shows. I seek out books that I wouldn't otherwise read because I know they're going to be TV shows or movies. It's just something I like to do. So I did track how many books I did that with in 2021, and the total was 22 out of the 76. So it was about a little under a third of my reading was screen reads, which feels like a pretty substantial amount to me. I also tracked rereads in 2021. I read 7, which was about 9% of my reading. And even though that's not something I've tracked in the other years past, I know that is more than I would normally allow myself in a year. I am learning to relax with regards to rereading books. This next stat is kind of like my YA to adult ratio, in that it's basically the same every year, regardless of how much I read. And that is the number of classics. And again, I have a very elastic definition of classic. In 2019, I read 11 classics, which was about 10.8%. 2020, it was 10 classics, which was 10.5%. And this, in 2021, it was 8 classics, which was 10.5%. Again, so I read classics at about the same rate every year, regardless of whether I intend to or not. Wait, this next chart took me forever to put together, the 2021 chart, so I didn't want to do it for the other years, sorry. and that is publication year. So I did group it 1910s to 1950s, and then the 60s through the 90s, and then the whole decade of the 2000s, and then 2010 until now. That's not a very, again, a very inelegant breakdown. But obviously, coming in the lead in 2021 were 2021 releases, since I did start really regularly reading ARCs this year, and I did sign up for NetGalley, and so many of those ebooks were ARCs that I read. There was a lot of new releases that I read this year, closely followed by 2019 and 2020 that had about 10 each. So I did look, I read 17 2021 and 22 releases, which was about 22% of my reading this year. So that was like a pretty solid chunk, was just like brand new books. Versus in years past, in 2020, it was about 9.5%, and 2019, it was about 11.8%. So that is definitely something that has made a jump in my reading this last year. And honestly, I think it's too much. I love having access to the new releases, and I do like feeling like a very informed reader and a very informed shopper. But I need to like knuckle down and get through some like backlist titles if I'm ever going to get a handle on my TBR, because it is out of control. But yeah, that was the last chart I put together, and like I said, it took forever to put this one together. So I didn't feel like doing it for the other 2 years. We'll just have to wonder. And that does it for my 2021 reading stats compared to 19 and 20. That was a lot of work. Yeah, I think this is super fun. I love tracking my reading stats. I do probably need to get on the Storygraph so I can have a computer do this for me, because this was a lot of work. I have 12 pages of notes. That's too much. But that is all I have. January is flying by. Going on vacation and then having COVID will do that to you. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.